Hollywood tried burying these films faster than a corpse in the desert. Critics called them unwatchable abominations, while audiences couldn't look away. One director mortgaged his house to finish filming after 3 actors quit mid-production. Another caused riots in Texas theaters. These are the 19 greatest horror westerns ever made, the ones that still give Western fans nightmares decades later. High Plains Drifter, 1973. Clint Eastwood's ghostly stranger rides into Lago and immediately executes 3 men in broad daylight. Nobody stops him. The town hired him for protection, but he's got vengeance on his mind. Watch as he literally paints the entire town red and renames it Hell. This isn't just another Western, it's Eastwood turning the genre inside out, creating something far more disturbing. Critics freaked out. The Catholic Film Office condemned it for excessive violence and amorality. Roger Ebert called it a Gothic Western, almost expressionistic. The film cost just $1.3 million to make and pulled in over $15 million, proving audiences wanted their Westerns with a side of supernatural terror. What nobody talks about is the lake scene. Eastwood insisted on filming in freezing water at 4 a.m. to capture that eerie fog. The crew nearly revolted. 3 cameras were ruined. When asked why, Eastwood just said, "I wanted it to feel like the gates of hell opening." The film's final reveal, that the stranger might actually be the vengeful spirit of a murdered marshal, wasn't just shocking. It rewrote what a Western could be. I understand you'd like me to replace those modern films with Golden Age classics. I'll revise those entries to feature horror Westerns exclusively from cinema's Golden Age. Here are the replacements. The Devil's Partner, 1942. A mysterious old man makes a pact with the devil in a remote New Mexico town, transforming into his young nephew through dark rituals to win the affections of the local beauty. Director Charles Rondeau delivered one of the most unsettling shapeshifter tales ever to hit Western screens, blending frontier isolation with supernatural terror. The film premiered during wartime when audiences craved escapism, not existential dread. Theater owners complained viewers walked out during the animal transformation scenes. Despite costing only $42,000 to produce, it barely broke even during its original run, forcing Producers Releasing Corporation to shelve it for nearly 2 decades. What makes it genuinely disturbing is how it uses practical effects to suggest man-animal hybrids. The scene where protagonist Nick transforms partially into a horse still unnerves today, achieved using primitive makeup techniques and shadow play. William Schallert, who played the Doctor, later confessed he took the role only because he was literally starving, but called it the creepiest B-Western I ever worked on. The film's final confrontation with the devil himself employed red-tinted frames and reverse-printed footage to create hellish visuals that pushed the boundaries of 1940s cinema. Jesse James meets Frankenstein's daughter, 1966. Legendary outlaw Jesse James, wounded after a botched robbery, seeks help at a remote mansion where Dr. Maria Frankenstein is continuing her grandfather's experiments using frontier victims. Director William Bodine, nicknamed One Shot for his rapid-fire filming style, created this bizarre mashup during his final years in Hollywood. Shot back-to-back with Billy the Kid versus Dracula in just 6 days, the production was notoriously cheap. Actor John Lupton, who played Jesse James, later revealed they filmed without permits in Bronson Canyon, having to pause whenever park rangers appeared. The film cost approximately $85,000 and became a drive-in staple, earning nearly 10 times its budget in rural theaters, where Western fans would watch anything with Jesse James in the title. The brain transplant scene pushed boundaries for 1966 cinema, showing Maria Frankenstein removing a ranch hand's brain and replacing it with mechanical parts. Critic Michael Weldon called it one of those rare films that actually delivers exactly what its title promises. Despite its obvious flaws and camp value, it pioneered the horror Western crossover and remains one of the most audacious genre experiments of the 1960s. Nora Hayden, who played the female lead, later quit acting altogether, saying this film convinced her Hollywood had completely lost its mind. The Beast of Hollow Mountain, 1956. American rancher Jimmy Ryan battles mysterious cattle disappearances near a forbidden mountain in Mexico. Locals blame a legendary beast, but Jimmy dismisses their superstitions until he encounters a living Allosaurus preserved in prehistoric tar pits. This groundbreaking film holds the distinction of being the first ever dinosaur western, blending six-shooters with prehistoric terror. The film originated from an idea by Willis O'Brien, the stop-motion pioneer who created King Kong, though he died before seeing it completed. Shot in vibrant CinemaScope and color across Mexican locations, the production faced constant troubles with the mechanical dinosaur, which frequently malfunctioned in the desert heat, forcing costly delays. The most impressive technical achievement is the climactic quicksand sequence, where stop-motion animation is seamlessly integrated with live-action footage as cowboys battle the dinosaur. United Artists had no idea how to market such a bizarre hybrid, releasing different trailers for Western and horror audiences. Despite mixed reviews, it performed surprisingly well, particularly in international markets where the dinosaur versus cowboys concept transcended language barriers. Director Edward Nassour later claimed that a real-life rancher in Mexico approached him after a screening, insisting similar creatures still existed in remote mountain regions. Riders of the Whistling Skull, 1937. The three Musketeers, searching for a missing archaeologist in the desert, discover an ancient Native American city guarded by a cult of murderous skull worshippers. Director Mac V. Wright created one of Republic Pictures' most atmospheric B-westerns, incorporating occult rituals and mummified corpses into what began as a standard Western rescue mission. Shot on location in Arizona's Painted Desert, the production faced numerous challenges, including a scorpion infestation in the cast's sleeping quarters. With a budget of just $85,000, the crew created the ancient city ruins using plaster and repurposed sets from other productions. Despite these limitations, the film turned a healthy profit, particularly in rural theaters where audiences were starved for thrills. The cave sequence where explorers discover preserved ancient bodies still delivers genuine chills, achieved through innovative lighting techniques that transformed simple props into nightmare fuel. What makes this film significant is how it incorporates authentic Native American mythology alongside Hollywood inventions, creating a supernatural threat that feels uniquely tied to Western landscapes. The Whistling Skull itself, created using cattle bones and hidden air tubes, became so iconic that Republic Pictures received complaints from parents whose children couldn't sleep after seeing the film. The Night Riders, 1939. A spectral band of white-hooded riders terrorizes landowners in the Southwest, led by a corrupt land baron using ghostly disguises to drive out settlers. John Wayne stars in this Republic Pictures thriller that blends Western justice with supernatural terror, only revealing in the final act whether the horrors are genuine or elaborate hoaxes. Director George Sherman shot the film in just 12 days on a budget of $110,000, using leftover sets from more expensive productions. The night riding sequences required innovative lighting techniques, with cinematographer William Nobles creating eerie phosphorescent effects on the riders' costumes, using early fluorescent paint illuminated by hidden ultraviolet lights. What makes this film stand out is how it plays with audience expectations, presenting seemingly supernatural events with enough ambiguity to maintain genuine tension. The scene where phantom riders emerge from cemetery mist remains genuinely unsettling. Three Musketeers films typically performed well in rural markets, but this entry exceeded expectations, playing to packed houses in urban theaters as well. Ray Corrigan, who co-starred alongside Wayne, later revealed that many theaters exploited the film's horror elements by hiring local actors to dress as ghost riders and terrify audiences as they left screenings. The Phantom Empire, 1935. Singing cowboy Gene Autry discovers an advanced civilization living beneath his ranch, the lost city of Morania, ruled by the tyrannical Queen Tika. Director Otto Brouwer created cinema's first science fiction Western serial, merging singing cowboys with futuristic robots and underground death rays. Mascot Pictures produced this 12-chapter serial on a shoestring budget, with much of the underground city constructed from household items. The robot costumes were made from storm drain pipes and heating ducts. Despite these limitations, audiences were mesmerized by the bizarre genre mashup. The serial's success helped finance Republic Pictures' formation when Mascot merged with several other Poverty Row studios. The horror elements shine in sequences where surface dwellers are captured and subjected to mind control experiments by Morania's scientists. The underground civilization's architecture, a strange Art Deco nightmare of spires and metallic chambers, was created by repurposing leftover sets from sci-fi films and adding Western elements like horse skeletons and cattle skulls. What's most fascinating is how the serial blends cutting-edge technology with ancient superstitions, suggesting the underground empire has existed since prehistoric times, watching and manipulating surface civilizations. Man-Made Monster, 1941. A carnival performer survives a deadly bus crash because of his natural immunity to electricity. A mad scientist transforms him into an electrically charged killer who terrorizes a Western town, glowing in the dark as he stalks his victims. Lon Chaney Jr. delivers one of his most underrated performances in this universal horror that brings science fiction terror to frontier settings. Shot in just 3 weeks on a budget of $86,000, the film showcased groundbreaking special effects. Chaney wore a rubber suit covered in phosphorescent paint that would glow when exposed to ultraviolet light, creating the illusion of his body crackling with electrical energy. The effect was so convincing that Universal received letters asking how they'd managed to electrify an actor without killing him. The most disturbing sequence shows Chaney's transformation from gentle carnival performer to mindless killer, achieved through subtle performance shifts rather than makeup effects. Despite strong reviews, the film underperformed at the box office, overshadowed by Universal's more established monster franchises. It found new life on television in the 1950s, where late-night broadcasts terrified a new generation. Boris Karloff reportedly told Chaney this performance should have made him a star, years before The Wolfman finally did. Near Dark, 1987. A young cowboy falls for a mysterious girl who turns out to be part of a vampire family roaming the modern West. Director Kathryn Bigelow created the ultimate vampire western, merging dusty roads and neon bars with predators who enjoy the hunt. Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton deliver performances so chilling you'll forget vampires were ever romantic. The production faced constant budget problems. Bigelow shot much of it guerrilla style, without permits, using natural light to save money. The film cost $5 million, but earned only $3.4 million, arriving 2 months after The Lost Boys grabbed the vampire spotlight. Tangerine Dream's synth score creates an eerie, pulsing backdrop to the bloodshed. What's incredible is that the word vampire is never once mentioned in the entire film. Bigelow trusted the audience to understand what these creatures were by their actions, not their labels. The film's infamous bar scene, where Paxton's character turns a honky-tonk into a slaughterhouse, remains one of the most terrifying moments in horror Western history. Grim Prairie Tales, 1990. 4 strangers around a campfire in the Old West share increasingly disturbing horror stories. James Earl Jones and Brad Dourif deliver powerhouse performances as the bounty hunter and the meat clerk trying to outdo each other with tales of terror. Director Wayne Coe created an anthology Western horror that feels like Rod Serling wandered into a John Ford film. The film struggled to find distribution. Too weird for Western fans, too Western for horror audiences. It finally got a limited theatrical run before disappearing to VHS. Critics were baffled but intrigued. The Washington Post called it a surrealist campfire tale, unlike anything in either genre. What's incredible is how each segment tackles different horror subgenres: supernatural revenge, psychological terror, monster horror, while maintaining a cohesive Western framework. The most disturbing segment involves a pregnant woman alone on the prairie facing an inhuman threat. Filmed for just $1.2 million, the production used every trick in the book to create period authenticity on a shoestring budget, including borrowing props from other Western productions shooting nearby. Eyes of Fire, 1983. A banished preacher leads his followers into uncharted territory in 1750, settling in a valley the Native Americans avoid because it's haunted by vengeful forest spirits. Director Avery Crounce created the most underrated folk horror Western ever made, blending early American history with supernatural terror that still disturbs today. Shot in the Ozarks with a cast of unknowns, the film used ingenious low-budget techniques to create its supernatural effects. Crowns projected images onto smoke and used double-exposure photography rather than expensive optical effects. Critics didn't know what to make of it. It was too art house for horror fans and too horrific for the art house crowd. The tree spirits remain some of the most uniquely terrifying entities in horror cinema. Faces emerging from bark, limbs that aren't quite limbs. What makes it truly haunting is how it portrays colonization as a horror story, from multiple perspectives. The film disappeared for decades, becoming almost mythical among horror collectors who traded degraded VHS copies. It was finally restored and re-released in 2022, cementing its status as a visionary horror western that was decades ahead of its time. Westworld, 1973. Nothing can go wrong, they promise wealthy guests at a high-tech Wild West theme park staffed by robots. Then the gunslinger malfunctions and starts hunting humans for real. Michael Crichton directed this sci-fi western horror 2 decades before writing Jurassic Park, essentially telling the same story. Technology running amok in an amusement park. The film cost $1.5 million to make, a modest budget even for 1973, and earned over $10 million at the box office. Yul Brynner's performance as the relentless android gunslinger created the template for The Terminator a decade later. James Cameron openly acknowledges the influence. Westworld pioneered digital image processing to create the robot vision sequences, the first use of computer-digitized images in a feature film. What makes it truly terrifying isn't just Brynner's unstoppable killer, but how it predicts our future relationship with AI and simulated experiences. The scene where technicians realize they've lost control of their creation plays even more disturbing today than it did in 1973. The Valley of Gwangi, 1969. Cowboys discover a hidden valley of dinosaurs and decide to capture a Tyrannosaurus Rex for their Wild West show. What could go wrong? Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion creatures meet classic Western elements in this utterly unique genre mashup that influenced generations of filmmakers, including Spielberg, who paid homage to it in Jurassic Park's T-Rex breakout scene. The film was a passion project for Willis O'Brien, the stop-motion pioneer who created King Kong, but he died before production began. Harryhausen took over to honor his mentor's vision. Despite its incredible effects, the film underperformed at the box office, making only $2.5 million against its $1.5 million budget. The rodeo sequence where cowboys rope the T-Rex took 7 months of painstaking stop-motion work to complete. 114 separate elements had to be composited for just 4 minutes of screen time. What's most impressive is how seamlessly the film blends Western action sequences with monster movie thrills. The terror when the captured dinosaur breaks loose in a cathedral during a show remains one of the most perfectly executed creature feature sequences ever filmed. The Wind, 1928. Letty arrives in the desolate Texas prairie where the relentless wind drives settlers to madness. When she's assaulted by a cattle buyer during a sandstorm, she kills him and buries the body, only to have the howling wind uncover her crime. Lillian Gish delivers one of silent cinema's most haunting performances in Victor Sjöström's psychological horror western. The production was notoriously brutal. Filming in the Mojave Desert with temperatures reaching 120 degrees, the crew used 8 airplane propellers to create constant sandstorms. Gish's face was permanently windburned, and she found sand in her ears for months afterward. MGM forced Sjöström to change his bleak ending to something more upbeat against his wishes. What's remarkable is how the film captures psychological horror without modern techniques. Just Gish's expressive face, innovative camera work, and those ever-present winds. The hallucination sequences where Letty sees the cattle buyer's ghost rising from the sand were revolutionary for 1928. Modern horror directors still study this film for its ability to create overwhelming dread with minimal resources. Curse of the Undead, 1959. A mysterious gunslinger arrives in a frontier town where a rancher's daughter is suffering from a strange illness. The gunslinger offers to help with their problems, but he's actually a vampire using his supernatural reflexes to win gunfights. Director Edward Dine created the first true vampire western, decades before Near Dark or From Dusk Till Dawn. Universal produced it as a B-movie on a minuscule budget, shooting in just 11 days. Critics dismissed it, but it developed a cult following through late-night TV screenings. The film cleverly reimagines vampire lore for the Western setting. The gunslinger sleeps in a coffin lined with his native soil, but can move about during the day as long as he avoids direct sunlight. What makes it fascinating is how it subverts both genres. The vampire doesn't have fangs. He uses a special bullet to drain victims. Holy water gets loaded into bullets. The climactic showdown involves a gunfight where one duelist uses a cross as a weapon. For a low-budget B-movie from 1959, it's remarkably innovative in blending Western and horror mythologies into something entirely new. The Beast of Hollow Mountain, 1956. American rancher Jimmy Ryan faces mysterious cattle disappearances near a forbidden mountain in Mexico. Locals blame the legendary beast, but Jimmy's skeptical until he encounters a living Allosaurus preserved in prehistoric tar pits. This first-ever dinosaur western was actually based on an idea by King Kong creator Willis O'Brien. The film was shot in CinemaScope and color to showcase its monster, but budget constraints meant the dinosaur doesn't appear until the final 20 minutes. United Artists marketed it as a straightforward western in some regions and a monster movie in others, confusing audiences. Despite mixed reviews, it performed well in drive-ins, making back several times its modest budget. The stop-motion effects, while dated by today's standards, were groundbreaking for incorporating a prehistoric creature into Western settings. The climactic sequence where cowboys try to rope the dinosaur like a steer remains uniquely thrilling. What's fascinating is how the film blends Mexican folklore with paleontology, suggesting the monster legends were based on actual dinosaurs surviving in isolated areas, a concept Jurassic Park would explore decades later. Billy the Kid vs. Dracula, 1966. Legendary outlaw William Bonney faces off against Count Dracula, who's terrorizing the frontier and has his eyes on Billy's fiancée. John Carradine plays the vampire with theatrical menace, while Chuck Courtney's Billy trades his six-shooters for wooden stakes. Director William Bodine shot this cult oddity back-to-back with Jesse James meets Frankenstein's daughter on the same sets. The production was infamously rushed, completed in just 8 days on a budget of approximately $100,000. Carradine later admitted he took the role strictly for the paycheck, calling it the worst film I ever appeared in. Despite this, it became a drive-in favorite, making enough money to keep Embassy Pictures afloat through a financial rough patch. What's unintentionally hilarious is how the film tries to incorporate vampire lore into Western settings. Dracula's hypnotic powers don't work when his victims are holding metal, so Billy uses his sheriff's badge as protection. The vampire's weakness to sunlight creates some genuinely tense standoff sequences where Billy must face Dracula before sunset. Despite its obvious flaws and camp value, the film pioneered the supernatural Western crossover that would later be taken more seriously. Ghost Town, 1988. Deputy Langley searches for a missing woman and stumbles upon a ghost town trapped in time, terrorized by an undead outlaw and his gang who've been hanging people for a century. Director Richard Governor created one of the 80s most underrated horror westerns, blending gunslinger action with supernatural revenge. The film was produced by Charles Band's Empire Pictures just as the company was going bankrupt. Despite solid practical effects and ambitious stunts, it barely got theatrical distribution before being dumped to VHS. Horror fans discovered it through late-night cable screenings, where its eerie atmosphere found the right audience. The ghostly gallows sequences still disturb today. Each victim forced to write their name before being hanged, their souls trapped in the town forever. Frank Luz, who played Deputy Langley, performed many of his own stunts, including a dangerous horse fall that left him with 3 broken ribs. The film's highlight is its climactic ghost-on-ghost showdown, where spectral bullets actually have consequences for the undead. Despite its low budget, the film captures frontier isolation and supernatural dread more effectively than many bigger productions. Terror of Tiny Town, 1938. A town of little people faces off against cattle rustlers and a villainous banker in this utterly bizarre Western horror oddity. The entire cast consists of little people, including former Munchkin actors from The Wizard of Oz, riding Shetland ponies, and walking under saloon doors. Director Sam Newfield created what might be the strangest Western ever made. Produced by Jed Buell on a shoestring budget as a novelty film, it was marketed with the tasteless tagline, "Midgets, Midgets, Midgets," and initially treated as a curiosity. Yet it made significant profits, touring country fair circuits for years after its theatrical run. Modern viewers are understandably uncomfortable with its exploitation elements, but the cast reportedly enjoyed the rare opportunity to headline a feature film. What pushes this from oddity to horror territory is the film's unintentionally disturbing atmosphere. The production design creates an uncanny valley effect, everything scaled down but slightly off, creating a nightmarish funhouse mirror version of Western tropes. The saloon brawl sequence, with tiny cowboys swinging from chandeliers, has been cited by David Lynch as an influence on his surrealist approach to genre filmmaking. It's either the most unintentionally terrifying Western ever made, or a brilliant piece of surrealist cinema decades ahead of its time. Which of these nightmare Westerns have you actually seen? The horror Western remains one of cinema's most underappreciated hybrid genres. Too scary for Western purists, too dusty for horror fans. But these films reveal America's darkest frontier fears in ways traditional Westerns never could. Does combining supernatural terror with Western mythology give us a more honest look at the violence that actually built the American West? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.